every animal in the ocean exists because it earned the right to be there. Over hundreds of millions of years, evolution has been running the most ruthless quality control program in the history of life on this planet. If you're too slow, you get eaten. If you're too small, you get swallowed whole. If you don't have teeth, claws, venom, camouflage, or the raw intelligence to outthink everything trying to kill you, evolution removes you from the system. No exceptions, no appeals. The ocean does not tolerate weakness. It never has. So somebody needs to explain to me how this thing is still alive. This is the ocean sunfish, also called Mola, which literally translates to millstone because that's exactly what it looks like. A giant, flat, circular slab of biological confusion drifting through the open water like a dinner plate somebody tossed off a cruise ship. It has no real tail. Its brain is the size of a walnut. It can barely control where it's going in a strong current. And yet, against every single law of natural selection, this thing grows larger than a great white shark. The ocean sunfish is the heaviest bony fish on the entire planet. Not the fastest, not the deadliest, not the most cunning. The heaviest. An animal that looks like God forgot to finish rendering it somehow holds the weight record over every bony fish in existence. We're talking up to 5,000 pounds. That's heavier than a pickup truck. A pickup truck made entirely of poor decisions drifting sideways through the Pacific Ocean. So how does something this seemingly useless survive in the most competitive ecosystem on Earth? What is the ocean sunfish actually doing that we're clearly not understanding? And why does evolution, which has ruthlessly eliminated millions of species far more capable than this, keep letting it pass the test? To answer that, you first have to understand just how broken this fish appears to be on paper. Because honestly, the list of design flaws is so long it starts to feel intentional. Like evolution specifically chose to nerf this one animal just to see what would happen. Let's start with the body. Most fish have a streamlined shape for a very obvious reason. Water is roughly 800 times denser than air. Moving through it efficiently isn't a luxury. It's a survival requirement. Tuna are shaped like torpedoes. Marlins are shaped like spears. Sharks have been perfecting their hydrodynamic profile for 400 million years. The ocean sunfish looked at all of that engineering and apparently chose violence against itself. Its body is laterally compressed, almost completely flat, and roughly circular. It genuinely looks like someone took a normal fish, sliced it in half right behind the dorsal fin, and just left the front portion floating there. Scientists believe the sunfish actually evolved from ancestors that had proper tails, and then somewhere along the way, it just stopped developing one. What it has instead is called a clivus. That's a wavy, stiff ridge formed from its dorsal and anal fins kind of merging together at the back. It doesn't propel the fish forward like a real tail would. It's the biological equivalent of replacing your car's engine with a ceiling fan and hoping for the best. Then there's the brain. In a fish that can grow over 10 feet tall and weigh as much as a small car, the brain is roughly the size of a walnut, about 4 grams. To give you an idea of how absurd that ratio is, its own spinal cord actually weighs more than its brain does. A largemouth bass, a fish you can hold comfortably in one hand, has a proportionally larger brain relative to its body. The sunfish is not outsmarting anything. It is not running complex calculations about predator evasion. It is, by almost every neurological measure we have, one of the least mentally equipped large animals in the ocean, and the defense situation is somehow even worse. Sea lions off the coast of California have been observed doing something to ocean sunfish that can only be described as recreational bullying. They don't eat them, not usually. What they do is bite the fins off, they cripple the fish and then bat it around at the surface like a toy. Groups of sea lions have been filmed tearing sunfish apart piece by piece, not out of hunger, but seemingly because nothing is stopping them. The sunfish does almost nothing to resist. It has no escape speed. It has no weapons. Its skin can be up to 3 inches thick, which sounds impressive until a 600-pound sea lion decides your entertainment. 3 inches of skin doesn't help you much when you can't even swim away. Sharks will also eat them. Orcas eat them. Even seabirds have been seen picking at sunfish that are basking at the surface. It's an open buffet for basically anything with a mouth and a little bit of ambition. On paper, this animal should have been extinct 10 million years ago. But it's not, and that's where the story gets genuinely strange. Because despite being what appears to be evolution's most half-hearted attempt at creating a fish, the ocean sunfish hasn't just survived, it's thriving. They exist in every temperate and tropical ocean on the planet. They've been around for millions of years, and the most confusing part of the entire equation is their size. An adult ocean sunfish can stretch over 10 feet from fin tip to fin tip and weigh over 5,000 pounds. The world record was a specimen that tipped the scales at roughly 5 to 70 pounds. That's not just big for a poorly designed fish. That's bigger than a great white shark. It's bigger than most species of dolphins. It's heavier than a black rhinoceros. This is an animal with no tail, barely any brain, no combat ability, and the hydrodynamic profile of a frisbee. And yet it outweighs almost every other bony fish on the planet. How? The answer starts with what they eat. And this is where it gets genuinely absurd. Ocean sunfish primarily eat jellyfish. If you know anything about jellyfish, you know they are roughly 95% water. Nutritionally, eating a jellyfish is barely a step above eating a wet napkin. There is almost nothing useful in there. A jellyfish has negligible protein compared to actual prey. Minimal fat. It's basically a transparent bag of seawater with a mild electrical problem. And this is the primary food source of a 5,000-pound fish. To sustain a body that massive on a diet that nutritionally bankrupt, the sunfish has to eat an almost unreasonable amount of jellyfish. We're talking a constant, relentless intake of food that would make competitive eaters look restrained. Studies have shown that sunfish spend a huge portion of their waking hours doing nothing but eating. It's not a lifestyle, it's a full-time job with mandatory overtime. Now, normally in nature, you can draw a clean line between what an animal eats and how big it gets. Predators that eat calorie-dense food like meat can afford to grow large because each meal gives them a significant energy return. Animals that eat low-calorie food like leaves or plankton tend to compensate with extreme efficiency or specialized digestive systems. The sunfish doesn't really fit either model cleanly. It eats nutritionally vacant food and still grows to the size of a small vehicle. For a long time, this didn't make any sense to researchers. How do you build a 5,000-pound body on a diet of ocean water with texture? Part of the answer is that sunfish don't exclusively eat jellyfish. Recent stomach content studies have revealed that their diet is actually broader than the popular narrative suggests. They eat salps, small squid, crustacean larvae, sponges, eelgrass, and even small fish when the opportunity arises. Jellyfish make up the majority, but they're supplementing with whatever else drifts into range. It's not exactly a gourmet menu by any standard, but it's more varied than people think. But even with the supplemental diet factored in, the caloric math still barely adds up. Which brings us to the other half of the equation. Sunfish don't need to do much. They have almost no muscles dedicated to fast swimming. They aren't chasing prey. They aren't fighting territorial battles. They aren't migrating at high speeds across ocean basins like tuna. Their metabolic cost of simply existing is remarkably low for an animal their size. They are, in the most efficient sense possible, doing the absolute bare minimum at all times. And somehow that's enough. It's like watching someone build a mansion by collecting pennies. Individually, none of it makes sense. But over time, with an almost pathological commitment to doing nothing except eating and floating, the weight adds up. Slowly, consistently, and to a degree that seems to personally offend marine biologists. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. Everyone focuses on the sunfish being slow, dumb, and poorly built. Which is fair, but almost nobody asks the real question. If this animal is so poorly designed for survival, why hasn't it gone extinct? Why hasn't natural selection, which has deleted 99.9% of all species that have ever lived, managed to get rid of something that can barely swim in a straight line? The answer is one of the most underrated survival strategies in all of biology, and it has nothing to do with being strong. What if the ocean sunfish isn't badly designed at all? What if it's designed perfectly for a strategy that most people don't even recognize as a strategy? See, there are basically two ways to survive in nature. The first is the obvious one. Be powerful, be fast, be smart. Outcompete everything around you. Build armor, grow teeth, develop venom. That's the approach of sharks, orcas, and basically every animal that gets its own documentary series. But there's a second strategy, one that's far less cinematic but statistically just as effective over deep evolutionary time. Don't try to win the fight. Just make sure you can never be fully erased. The ocean sunfish chose option 2, and it went absolutely nuclear with it. A single female ocean sunfish can produce up to 300 million eggs in a single reproductive cycle. Let me put that number in context for a second. 300 million. That is more than any other known vertebrate on the planet. A cod, which is already considered a highly prolific breeder, produces around 1 to 9 million eggs. A bluefin tuna tops out at roughly 10 million. The sunfish produces 300 million. That's not a reproductive strategy. That's a statistical hostile takeover of an entire ocean. Now, obviously, the vast majority of those eggs will never survive. Most will be eaten within hours. The larvae are absolutely tiny, about 2.5 millimeters long, and they look nothing like the adults. They're covered in small spikes and resemble tiny floating burrs. At this stage, they are food for essentially everything. Small fish eat them, plankton feeders eat them, filter feeders eat them accidentally. The mortality rate is staggering. But here's where the math starts tilting in the sunfish's favor. Even if 99.99% of those 300 million eggs die, that still leaves tens of thousands of surviving offspring per spawning event. Over the lifespan of a single female, the numbers become overwhelming. The sunfish doesn't need each individual to survive. It just needs the sheer volume to guarantee that enough of them do. Evolution didn't design this fish to fight for its life. It designed this fish to make fighting irrelevant by flooding the ocean with so many copies of itself that no predator could ever make a meaningful dent. Despite everything I've said about this fish being slow and poorly built, the ocean sunfish can dive deep, not just a little deep, over 2,600 feet deep. That puts it in the same depth range as many dedicated deep sea species. For an animal that looks like it would struggle to navigate a kiddie pool, this is a remarkable capability. Scientists believe these deep dives are targeted hunting runs. Down in the cold, dark water column, the sunfish goes after deep water jellyfish and siphonophores that surface feeders simply cannot reach. It's found a food source that nobody else at its size is bothering to exploit. Then it comes back to the surface and does something that looks absolutely ridiculous but is actually quite clever. It lies flat on its side and sunbathes. Just floats there, one side up, soaking in the heat. This isn't laziness, it's thermoregulation. After spending extended periods in near freezing water at depth, the sunfish uses solar radiation to reheat its core body temperature. It also uses these surface sessions as a cleaning opportunity. Seabirds land on the exposed flank and pick off parasites, because of course the sunfish is also one of the most parasite-riddled animals in the entire ocean. They host over 40 different species of parasites on and inside their bodies at any given time. So the sunbathing serves double duty: warmth and pest control. It's not glamorous, but it's functional. The sunfish also has one more thing going for it that most people skip right over: its skin. While it lacks traditional scales, that skin is extremely thick, up to 3 inches in some areas, and covered in a rough texture that functions like biological sandpaper coated in mucus. It doesn't stop a committed predator, but it makes the sunfish a less pleasant meal than almost anything else in the water. It's the equivalent of wrapping yourself in something that makes you deeply unenjoyable to chew. You can still be eaten, but whoever does it is going to have a bad time. So where does this actually leave us? Is the ocean sunfish a mistake? A glitch in the system that evolution somehow forgot to patch out? No. The sunfish is something far more interesting than a mistake. It's living proof that the game of evolution doesn't have one way to win. We tend to think of survival as a contest of strength. The biggest teeth, the fastest speed, the sharpest brain. And for many species, that's absolutely the path that works. But evolution doesn't care about being impressive. It cares about exactly one thing: whether you're still here. And the ocean sunfish is still here. It's been here for roughly 50 million years, depending on how far back you trace its lineage through the Mollidae family. That's longer than great white sharks in their current form. Longer than most modern whale species. This floppy, walnut-brained, jellyfish-inhaling dinner plate has been drifting through the world's oceans since before our earliest ancestors climbed down from the trees. The sunfish didn't evolve to beat anything. It evolved to outlast everything. It's not a fighter, it's a flood. And over the long arc of deep evolutionary time, that strategy is nearly impossible to overcome. So the next time you see a photo of an ocean sunfish floating sideways at the surface, looking like the most bewildered animal on the planet, just remember what you're looking at: a 5,000-pound organism that eats wet nothing, has a walnut for a brain, swims like a broken ceiling fan, gets pushed around by sea lions, is covered in 40 species of parasites, and has been doing this successfully for longer than most apex predators have existed on Earth. It didn't need armor, it didn't need speed, it didn't need a single weapon. It just needed to be impossible to delete. And honestly, that might be the most unsettling survival strategy of all. Not because it's powerful, but because it's completely mathematically unstoppable. So, what do you think? Is the ocean sunfish the biggest mistake in the ocean, or the most underrated genius evolution has ever produced? Let me know in the comments.